we're really in this time of year preparing for Passover and that transition really from Purim to Passover, which is really all about coming out of Egypt, redemption, which again, all these are not just stories. They're not just stories of the past, but they're all really energies and consciousness, levels of consciousness that we're there to really tap into and to really bring into our lives. So I was kind of thinking about, there's so much to speak about when we speak about personal redemption and freedom, and I didn't really know where to begin. And then, I was thinking about myself. Like I always like to share things that I feel are relevant for me because then it's really coming from like a real place. So I really was thinking about my own personal, I guess, redemption, my own personal healing, really, which is really what, redemption and is really all about. And so much for me personally was healing that ability to speak, to share, to communicate, even though, to be honest, I am a Gemini. So whoever is a Gemini knows that Gemini is actually, oh yeah, Marcy? Nice, I could see that, yeah. Gemini is actually, their strength is communication. Zamina, you also Gemini? You're also born in?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it also. Nice. So that actually is considered a strength, like a Gemini thing is communication. It's very much part of who we are, actually. But again, when something is your soul strength, gift in the world, it also usually comes with some challenges. It could also sometimes there's a lot of blockages in those areas because it's actually our strength at the same time, and it's our gift to the world. So to get there is very often a process for people, especially, as I've seen, especially for Geminis as well, and for all of us. So again, I want to let's backtrack a little bit. And I have so many ideas I want to share. So let's see how this kind of flows and how it actually is communicated out. But I guess over Purim, I was really thinking about this idea that really also connects to Passover and redemption, because really when we're talking about coming out of redemption and coming into collective Mashiach, Geula, redemptive consciousness, we're talking about this idea of removing evil from the world, right? When the world reaches a place of the full and complete redemption, it says, Mavir Ruach Hatama Min Haaretz, that the spirit of impurity is going to come out of the world. In other words, all the dark energies, the klipot energy is going to be removed from the world. And that final, really dark energy that we're battling in the world right now is the energy of Amalek, of the nation Amalek, which is, again, there's many different, we're not sure exactly what that nation is, but it's an energy really in the world. And it says that there's an obligation to destroy Amalek. So I was really thinking about what does that mean? Because again, anything that's an obligation for on a collective means that there's also that energy within us. It's never like, oh, there's an energy out there in the world, some sort of spiritual force or energy. It's always about where again is that energy within ourselves. And that's always something to really think about. Like whenever we hear about evil energies, dark energies in the world, it's always an opportunity to kind of be like, where is that within me? Because when we all as individuals face that energy and heal that energy and rectify that energy, we also bring that healing into the world. So it got me thinking, and I was looking into, again, what is the root and source of Amalek in the world? And I learned things that I just never had known, that it says that Amalek, where did Amalek, the nation, actually start and come from? It came from one woman whose name was Timnah. Okay, Timnah was a noble princess. She came from a very wealthy, noble family. And it says that she wanted to convert and to be part of the Jewish people. And so what did she do? She went to the forefathers and she made that request that she wanted to become part of the Jewish people. And it says that she was actually rejected, that she was turned away. And what happened was, because when she was rejected, she said, she was a very smart woman. And she said, you know what, I'm not going to give up. I want to be part of the Jewish people. I want to be part of that nation, of the Jewish nation, because she saw the strength of the nation. And so what did she do? It says that she married Esav's, the concubine of Esav, whose name was Eliphaz. And in that union with the concubine of Esav, that birthed Amalek into the world. So it's a very interesting story. And I think it brought for me a lot of awareness as to what is this Amalek energy? What does it actually mean? So in essence, if you think about it, the fact that she was rejected is that's that core energy in Amalek, is the sense of rejection within ourselves. When we actually feel rejected, right, ourselves. What does rejection actually mean? Rejection on a very personal level is like the deepest, most painful feeling that a person feels, like, I don't belong, right? I'm not worthy, I'm not seen, I'm not validated. There's a tremendous amount of shame. Again, on the WhatsApp group, we spoke this week about shame. Shame is like the core feeling of disconnection that came into the world really through Adam. Adam, after the sin, it says that he felt shame. And it's really the core of so many other dark energies and feelings that are birthed from shame. So that was really the deepest core energy, again, of Amalek. That, again, we're all battling, that are the deepest feeling that a person, and the deepest hurt, pain, trauma that a person can really feel in this world, is a sense that is a belief system really that's created, that I'm not worthy. Maybe I felt rejection from my primary caregivers as a child. This deep rejection leads to shame and lack of a feeling of value, and chasing that value or worth through our doing and through our actions or people pleasing. And as a result, you feel like a lack of belonging in the world, a lack of belonging to, first of all, yourself, to maybe your immediate family, to the community that you live in. And when we feel that, automatically we start suppressing ourselves, right? And disconnecting, shutting ourselves down from our authentic selves. And what happens is very often people feel this sense of, I'm invisible, right? I don't exist, almost, from that deep rejection. And when we feel that, automatically what happens is that affects the flow of communication. Automatically, if a person feels shame and rejected, so they may be speaking, they may not be shy, they may get up even in front of a lot of people and share, but when a person is speaking from a place of being disconnected from their authentic self because they feel rejected, or they feel shame, and they feel not worthy, and they feel shut down. So even if they're communicating, they're not really communicating from a true, deep, authentic place. And I think very interesting, again, I was thinking about it so much of this journey again from Purim, from this Amalek energy, into the Passover energy, into redemption, and specifically the redemption of the communication of speech. I thought it was very interesting to me to really see it kind of at its source, at its core energy, which is something that I found very, very fascinating. And again, we're transitioning into Passover, into Pesach, which is, again, it's coming out of our own Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim in Hebrew literally means Mitzarim, which is constriction. When that feeling of constriction, of, again, rejection, shame, if you think about it, even in the body, what does that bring up for you? That feeling of rejection or shame or not being worthy. It's like a very constricted, tight energy. It's not an expansive, open energy. And again, Paro, who was the viceroy of the, arch leader of Egypt, he is, again, that dark energy that's also within ourselves. And coming out of Mitzrayim also is facing, is understanding, is connecting to, where are these dark energies within me? So very interesting. The Arizal actually says that the main klipa, the main dark energy of Paro, is the spiritual obstruction that blocks our speech from flowing freely, from feeling that we're able to communicate in a way of flow, of feeling connected to ourselves, so that we can share, we can communicate. We don't feel a fear of, oh, what are people going to think, or a shame of expressing ourselves. But the Arizal says that it's that ability, it's coming out of our own Mitzrayim, is recognizing where is that spiritual, emotional obstruction that blocks my speech from flowing freely. And where do we see that even? It says that paro, the same letters. If we take the word for paro and we switch the letters, paro is the same letters as oref. And oref in Hebrew means like the back of the neck. What is the back of the neck? The back of the neck really is the place of the vocal cords, right? The place where we speak from. In other words, there's the Mitzrayim, the constricted energy is that energy of the constriction of the oref, the back of the neck, the place of the flow of that communication. So yeah, I think it's an interesting place to kind of sit with and really ask ourselves, every one of us, again, this for me is a very personal feeling. And there was a lot of healing that I've done in this area. And I think so listen, we're coming into this holiday of Pesach, of Passover. And Pesach, like the Baal Shem Tov speaks about, what does it mean? Pesach literally means Pesach, like the mouth speaks. Peh is mouth. So Pesach is from the word the mouth speaks. And that's why so much of the Passover Seder, the night of Passover, is sitting around the table and at the Seder is sharing and speaking and repeating the story of Exodus. Because again, the rectification that we have, and this is really just to even be conscious of that when we're actually sitting at the Passover Seder and we're speaking the words of the Haggadah, we're actually healing a part of our speech, an aspect, an energy connected to our speech. Just the actual act of being at the Pesach Seder and sharing and speaking the words of the stories of the Haggadah of coming out of Mitzrayim. So what happened is we came out of Egypt, and the Arizal actually says that the whole process of the splitting of the sea, we came out of Egypt, we crossed the Sea of Reeds, there was the sea split. It says was that when we came out of the splitting of the sea was coming out of the spiritual blockage to actually speak with clarity. Like that was the sea that split. It almost was like, wow, now we were able to speak with clarity. And what happened when the Jews came out of the Sea of Reeds? They were able to sing. They sang that song, Az Yashir. There was the song that they sang, that the women sang and the men sang and Moses sang. And because the whole process, again, was not only were we able to speak, but now we're able to sing. We're able to express our words with joy and with pleasure. And that was a deep part of the process of coming out of Egypt. So now I want to go into, again, where can we glean from messages of the story of Exodus of how to actually do this work? Okay, because again, we want to like bring this practical and actually have tools from how can we today learn from the story of Exodus, of coming out of Mitzrayim, to allow ourselves to open up that channel, that throat chakra, that channel to be able to speak. So basically, where do we draw that from? We draw that from Moses. Moses was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, and the Jewish people, he was the one that actually led the Jewish people out of Egypt. And what happened was very interesting, and this is always something I never fully understood, was that Moses, again, God appeared to him at the burning bush, and he gives him this mission. He says, you have a mission to take the Jewish people, you're going to redeem them from Egypt. Now imagine if God gave any of us such a clear message of what was our mission in the world. We would all be dancing for joy and be so happy. But what actually happens is that Moses resists this mission. God tells him very clearly, this is your mission, to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. And what does Moses say? He says, no. I don't think this is for me. He says, I am not a man of words. I'm slow to speak. I have a slow tongue. It says that Moses actually had a speech impediment. that when he was in Mitzrayim, his mouth was burnt from the coals, and it literally says that he had a speech impediment and that he wasn't able to speak clearly. So what does God say to him? God says to him, don't worry. First of all, I'm the one that gives man the ability to speak. I'm going to read this exactly. It says, God, who gives man the ability to speak? Who makes him mute or deaf? That's what God answers him. In other words, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but again, it's not about you. It's not your ability to speak. You're the one that has to be eloquent to speak in order to lead the Jewish people. He's like, no, 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 no. I gave you this ability to speak. And if I gave you the ability to speak, I also gave you the ability to lead and to use your words, right? But again, I love this part of the story because it touched me so deeply. It says that God really has so much compassion still on Moses. And I think this is such a lesson for us to have compassion on himself. He's like, okay, you know what, Moses? You feel it's hard for you to speak. You know what? We'll make a deal here. I'm going to speak to you. You're going to speak to Aaron, your brother. And Aaron is actually going to be the one to relate all the messages and to communicate on your behalf, which I love this idea. It's something I never really thought about till now of like, there's so much compassion. You know, sometimes we're so hard on ourselves. Like, it's hard for us to speak and we have to break ourselves to speak. And God is like, yeah, like, again, yeah, I'm giving you this ability to speak, but slowly, it's going to be a process. You don't have to break yourself. It's not a 1, 2, 3 thing. And okay, in the beginning, you know, we're going to make this deal that Aaron is actually going to speak on your behalf. And I think that there's so many lessons, but another lesson I want to share is, besides the fact that there's so much compassion in it, is like we see a lot here about leadership. That leadership also is so much about collaboration. You know, sometimes we think that we have to do it all. We have to be the ones to do everything, you know, but we see, first of all, that there's such a beautiful collaboration here. In other words, like, yeah, I'm appointing you as a leader, and a leader does require speaking. That's the main role of a leader, but we can collaborate. You know, there's ways of working around this, you know. And also another idea is that healing really does come through supportive relationships. In other words, like I think what we just did right now here, which is so beautiful, that we're all speaking about how the fact that we're coming together and we're sharing how speech is, you know, communication is a trauma, is a challenge for all of us for very, very good reasons. But these supportive relationships is actually what does heal, right? It heals that ability to speak, to be authentically connected to ourselves, to just being in relationship, being in community, belonging again, and having supportive people in our lives. And again, it can be virtually. It doesn't, you know, that's a beautiful way to actually heal. So I was thinking about that a lot. And I want to go into also a little bit more of what does it actually mean that Moses had a speech impediment? Because it's not just like, oh, you know, he by accident burns his mouth with coals. Like, what does that actually mean, and why did that actually happen spiritually? What was the depth of that? What is the meaning behind it? So first of all, in order to understand that, we have to first of all understand what is speech itself. So according to Chassidut and Kabbalah, and this is something that's spoken about, especially in the book of Tanya, that what is actually speech? Speech is a creative force in the world. First of all, it says that God created the world and is constantly recreating the world all the time through this power of speech. It says that through the 10 asara ma'amarot, through the 10 measures of speech, God created the world, and he's constantly speaking the world into being all the time. So what is speech? Speech is actually creative. It brings life into the world. And that's why, first of all, I want to say we have to be so careful with our words. Like what I was speaking before of the power of silence, because words really do have so much power to create, to bring something into reality that, you know, a lot of times we speak so whatever, we don't think so much before we speak. And the harm that we could do to someone from saying something that could be hurtful or to ourselves, even how we speak to ourselves, you know, I'm talking about this inner critic of really being conscious very much about our speech, because again, it's a creative force in the world. God is constantly speaking, creating through words. But what is speech? It says that first of all, there's pre-thought. Before you actually even speak, there's first of all a thought that creates the speech. But even before the thought, the actual thought in the brain, there's even something called the pre-thought. So in other words, speech is like the final expression of something being birthed out into the world, right? You could think something and have a lot of ideas in your mind, but only through speech do we actually take something that's ours, that's one with us, an idea, a thought, a feeling that is one with us, and bring it out into the world when we actually speak. So speech is actually, it's something that is connected to a person in thought, but then it becomes expressed and it's now disconnected. It's separate from a person when you actually speak it. And that's why, again, we have to be so careful what we say, because we'd be like, oh, I don't really mean it. I don't really mean it. But even if we don't really think it, if not really something that we mean in our mind and our thoughts and our consciousness, once we said it, it's out there. It's out there in the world. And so what was the idea of Moses having a speech impediment is this idea that Moses, he was completely one and unified with the oneness of God. There was no him and God. He was completely one with God. He was a godly being and he was completely one with God. And there was nothing separate. There was no internal and external to Moses. There was no like me and something, a world outside of me. He was in complete oneness consciousness and therefore could not speak. Because again, speech is when there's something separate from us. So Moses was so completely one and united with God and with God's consciousness and God as his life force energy that he couldn't speak. So what do we really see from and what happened was Moses actually when he resisted this role of leadership because he didn't want to separate from that reality. He was basking the oneness of God, completely living from a place where there was no internal, there was no external. And then God's like, you have to speak, you have to be a leader, you have to use your words. And he was resisted that. But then he realized that ultimately he would have to become more of a self in order to actually lead. And he accepted finally that role. But again, it took time. And God had a lot of compassion him in that process. He sent him Aaron to speak for him. He's like, okay, it'll take time and have compassion. It's a process. Like I think every class we come back to that idea that life is a process. Spiritual growth, emotional growth, it's all a process. And we can actually glean from the Torah, from even these lessons, from how God even treated Moses about that idea. But what do we really see? That Moses really did grow in that process, because what happened is he took on the role as the leader, and at first Aaron spoke, but then he led the Jewish people with his words. And what do we actually see? That the last book of the Torah, which is basically Moses giving over his final, you could say his last will and testament, the final instruction to the Jewish people, which is the book of Devarim, right? The last book of the Torah. And Devarim literally means many words. So in other words, he really did heal. He's like, in other words, he transitioned from a place of, I have a speech impediment, a stutter, I can't speak, to being again, at the end of his life, a man of many, many words. And that is why it's so powerful to actually think about that growth and that transition of Moses, that he went from being a stutterer, a man that could not speak, to being a man at the end of his life of many, many words. So very interesting. I was learning this idea that, what does it say? The first verse in Devarim, it says, Ve'ela Devarim. These are the words that Moses, again, spoke to the Jewish people before his death, which is, it's always like a very emotional book to read. You think about it, it's like he's giving over his last wills to the Jewish people before he dies. And what does the Medrash actually say there? What does he say? He says, Eila Devarim, these are the words that I want to share. And the Jewish people actually say to him, wow, yesterday you were a man that couldn't speak, and now you're a man that says so much. That's what they actually said to him. They're like, wow, look at this. Like, you couldn't speak, and now Eila Devarim, these are the words. And what did that transition actually look like? So I want to bring over a teaching that I read because I think, again, it's touching on so many things that we spoke about, and there's so much practical lessons that we can learn. That it says from the Maori Naim speaks about this idea of Eila Devarim, that what did that process look like? That Moses, again, was a man that could not speak, and what was that transition to him being a man of many words? So it says that the transition came from this idea. It says that when you have difficulty of speech, repeat words of Torah. Okay, in other words, repeating words of Torah is basically the antidote or the remedy to be able to speak. Now, I think there's a lot of interesting points here. First of all, the word repeat. In other words, the idea of repetition. Like what we were saying, what Zalman was sharing, everyone actually here was actually sharing that idea of like, just practice it. Okay. So like, it's scary, you're in the gym and people are looking at you and, and it's like just repeating, saying how we feel, just like sharing and repeating and practicing is a huge part of the healing. Repeat words of Torah. Okay. Now, what is this idea again of the words of Torah? Okay, what does that actually mean? Repeat words of Torah, and how does that actually help heal? So words of Torah, the Maori Naim, he says that when the Jewish people were in the Egyptian exile, their dot was in a state of constriction. Okay, literally says that their dot. Dot, literally, what does dot actually mean? Dot is like, and we've spoken about this in many classes, is basically when we know something, but not just know it here, like what Marcy was saying, like there's a transition from the mind to the heart. It's like when we don't just know something here intellectually, but we know it in our body. When you actually, what Karen was also saying, like we can learn so much and always be learning and learning and learning. And again, we live in this information age where there's so much knowledge, but that is when you actually don't just learn it in your mind and you understand a concept, but you actually like feel it in your body. Your heart is open to feeling what it means, like emotionally you feel it, in your body you feel it. Like your whole being is actually transformed. That's why in the Torah, dot connotes, it says that actually when Adam and Eve, it says that Adam yada et chava isha, that Adam knew Eve. In other words, they were intimate together. It connotes like sexuality, pleasure, a union. In other words, like when we're so connected to ourselves, when these teachings have so influenced our life that we're so intimately connected to ourselves. There's a sense of intimacy with ourselves and comfortability with ourselves. And like the Torah is not just here, but it's made that transition down through our throat, to our heart, to our body. And when we come out of what's called, it says there, constricted consciousness is very much connected to constricted speech. Katnus hamoach is connected to the constriction of speech. And I think it's so much what we're saying when we feel a sense of constriction, when we feel like, wow, like our consciousness is being maybe squashed by others. When we feel a sense of maybe the surroundings that we're in, or we don't feel a sense of belonging, and we're with people that are constricting us and making us feel weak or making us feel not seen, that actually constricts our consciousness, and that just leads to constricted speech. So what does it say that Moses, what did he do? Repeating words of Torah is, in other words, learning and learning and learning to the point that the words of Torah were dot. They were part of him. They were one with him. And it says that what happened, that Moses actually felt a sense of awe, of like awe, wow, like of awe for God. And what does that awe lead to? It says that Moses was the humblest of all men. He was the leader of the Jewish people, the most holy, received the Torah. He says he saw God, face to face. He saw God completely. And yet it says that he was the humblest of all men. And that really is also the whole remedy for speech, it says. Because what does it mean he's the humblest of all men? In other words, when we rectified speech is when we realize that we're just a channel for God. It's not about us, me speaking. I used to feel that way, like when I would started teaching, it was like I was so like I was feeling nervous before getting on, talking, sharing my voice. And then I realized, you know what? That's because there's so much of me here. It's about me then. Like I got kind of realized it's my ego speaking then. If I'm really caring and concerned about what other people are going to think, and am I going to say things exactly right? And am I going to sound smart? And there's a lot of that ego that a lot of the trauma response of the ego, which is wants to feel safe because again, like people pleasing or feeling good about myself and feeling a sense of worth, but when we really come to a place that I'm just a channel for Hashem. I'm just a channel for God. It's not me speaking. Like God says, who even gave the ability to speak? He says to Moses. In other words, when we can come to a place of really like repeating the words of Torah, making it one with us to realize we're just a channel for God in this world. That's who we are. We're just like, again, we're doing, and God wants us to be an active co-creator in this world, but really we're just channels for God in the world. And when we actually come to that place, we're channeling. We're not necessarily speaking. We're speaking, but it's from an energy of channeling. It's not about me. And that is really one of the deepest places or ways to really heal speech is to realize, wow, like we're just a vessel and a channel for God in this world. And that's why, I try before I come on here even to say, or before I go on like a therapy, coaching call, like Hashem sifatay tiftach ufi yagid tzilatecha, like open up my mouth, God, that I should channel your praise in this world. So, it's like and I mean, I realize we all do this. Like we make it about us of like, we want to sound good. We want to sound smart, but really, really, again, we're channels for God in the world and God is speaking through us. And the fact that God put us in situations where we're with people that maybe disagree with us or challenge our ideologies in politics or in vaccines or whatever it may be, is also from God. And maybe God wants us to be a messenger for people in this world and to give some truth to a world there's a lot of darkness and to be a light onto other people. And the more we can actually recognize ourselves that, God didn't just by chance that God put us in certain places and certain communities and certain friends and certain people in our lives, but we're there with a higher mission and a higher purpose, which is to bring God awareness into the world. The more we can actually step out of the way and look at ourselves from that place of like, we're messengers. And if people don't like what we have to say, yes, again, it really may feel very, very scary. And this need for validation is really real. It's a true thing. And there may be a lot of shame and a lot of judgment, but the more we can actually realize, wow, everything is from God. And the fact that, again, these are friends of mine and these are people in my lives, I'm there to make a difference and I'm there to bring consciousness into the world. The more we can actually step out of the way and really speak from that place, which takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of inner work. It definitely does to like actually embody that, to dot that in our nervous system. It definitely takes a lot of inner work, but slowly, just like Moses, I feel like he's like, okay, step by step, first, you don't want to speak, fine. I'm going to send Aaron as the person, your representative, and he's going to communicate for you. And slowly, step by step, you'll get used to it. Like, don't be so hard on ourselves, like, you'll get used to it. It's okay. And then what happened? Moses became a man of words and he became a leader. So allowing ourselves to be gentle with ourselves in the process. I think there's a lot of compassion that I learned from this, from this teaching. Anyone else have anything else they want to share or communicate?
Yeah, I share something
Sure.
about what you were referring to. Like I'm in Overeaters Anonymous, as strong, and it's very much higher power. And when people share their miracle story of transformation, it's always they do a prayer at the beginning, like, get me out of this, let God speak through me. And
Mm,
one person always says, make God the hero of your story. And
mm,
that was all. So it reminded me of that. You
beautiful.
know, it's
Wow.
not our ego, it's not everything we have, any intelligence, speech, whatever comes from Hashem. So, but I like when they say, make God the hero of your story. So
Oh, I
that's
like
it.
that. That's a great line. I love that. Wow. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Do
Miriam,
you have your tambourines ready yet?
oh, I do. Sure. I have some on my wall.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We all
You
should.
got to change the clocks this Thursday or something?
Right. I think it's either Thursday or Saturday night. I can't remember. It's
Then,
actually, I think we usually change it on a Saturday night, but I think it is when we change it on a Thursday, if I remember correctly.
okay, so next week we'll all be on the same kind of page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think we may continue where in Israel it's still going to be 7:30 because I felt like we were going to bed so late, to be honest.
Absolutely.
It was
Yeah.
like finishing up and then it was like, 9:30, 10 o'clock by the time you get to bed. So this is actually nicer. It's just a little earlier for us, which is, I think it's good. So I think we're going to just continue it won't change anything for you, but just change it for us. Yeah.
Is it snowing there or really cold now?
Oh, no, no, no. It actually has been beautiful. It's been
Mm.
beautiful. It's been like in the 60s or so. It's beautiful here, actually. It's really like a spring. It's a very short spring in Israel. It's usually like goes from winter to hot, hot, hot fast. So I'm enjoying a little spring weather now. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
nice.
You.
All right. Wait, Miriam, did you want to share something before? Or
Me? No,
no? Okay. Okay,
I'm
great.
good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All
Thank
right,
you.
everyone. Have a beautiful week. All right. We'll see you next week, God willing. Okay. And oh, by the way, I actually did have this idea that maybe one week, maybe before Passover, I feel like it's so fascinating. Last week, when some people were on, not everyone was on, and we were sharing like story, like a lot of personal stories and of how we came to where we're at. And I think it's a beautiful idea for us to get together and maybe share our stories a little bit. I think we grow a lot. Like again, that's the whole story of Pesach, of Passover, of sharing. So whoever wants to share, again, no pressure, but I think it would be nice to kind of have like a community gathering, meet up where whoever wants to can share a little bit about how they came to live Kabbalah and came to their spiritual journeys. And I think it would just be very interesting to maybe kind of go around. And I think we can all learn a lot from each other's processes. So I would really enjoy it. I think
And maybe we can write like a book, a collection or something.
yeah, it's so fast. Really, it's so
My,
fast.
my life story could easily be a book. People always should write a book. So I'm sure many other people too.
Everyone, yeah. So whoever feels comfortable. But again, I think it's so beautiful because this is like I feel like a very safe place to share. And I think again, we're all healing our ability to connect to ourselves and authentically and communicate. And so there's a lot of healing in that as well. So I think it would be a nice